amazing Victorian look. And welcome everybody to the Gamification Revolution. I'm Gabe Zickerman, coming to you live from a snowy, rainy New York City. And we're here today with the amazing, incomparable Jesse Schell. Hi, Jesse. Welcome.
Hey, glad to be here.
Woohoo! Jesse, here's the thing. You've been a kind of visionary, a pioneer in many of these areas for a long time. And you gave this talk at Dice a few years ago that
Yeah,
was kind of about the sort of future that highlighted the importance of gamification, or at least the opportunities around gamification with some interesting examples. Fast forward, and the one that people often quote of you is the toothbrush that gives you rewards.
right.
So fast forward now, it's been about 3 years since that maybe aha moment that you had. What do you see as the future for play for pleasure in our world going forward?
Yeah, so I guess so a lot of stuff has happened since then. And I think a lot of the trends I talked about are continuing to happen. We continue to have more spreading out of technology. We're having technology kind of creep into smaller and smaller things. The whole toothbrush thing, yeah, it has actually happened. There are several companies that are making digital toothbrushes with sensors. And we're seeing this is affecting the whole game industry. This is affecting everybody in the fact that technology is creeping in little bits and pieces into everything. And I think what we're going to continue to see is people trying experiments to figure out what sorts of game structures and things are going to work in our lives and which ones aren't.
So we're in a stage where we're experimenting a great deal with that. And so take us back, to let's say in your life, how did you end up coming to the work that you do today, and tell everybody what it is that you do now and about Shell Games?
Yeah, sure. So I've been interested in games and entertainment my whole life. I started coding games when I was maybe about 12 years old. And I had an interesting background because I was partly really interested in technology and I was partly really interested in entertainment. I spent several years working in the circus, for example. And later I had an opportunity to work at Disney Imagineering. And that was great because I was able to take everything I knew about circuses and amusement parks and bring it together with everything I knew about technology because I worked at the virtual reality studio there. And I moved there from doing interactive theme park rides to doing massively multiplayer games. Then about 12 years ago, I came out here to Pittsburgh to teach at the Entertainment Technology Center, which has been a marvelous experience. This is my office there right now. I've been teaching there all this time, and also I started a company, Shell Games, which I started about 10 years ago, and we do a lot of different things. We do entertainment experiences. We do a lot of kids and family stuff, but lately we're doing, I would say, about 80% educational and transformational games. That's the phrase I'm trying to get out there. People have been saying serious games for a while, but I much prefer the phrase transformational games, games designed to change the player in some way.
So I want to talk about transformational games, but before we go any further, I want to let everyone know that if you want to ask a question for Jesse or me, you can click on the button Submit Question or Camera, and if you have a camera, we actually can even bring you on board, and I'll be facilitating those questions as we talk today, and you can see Jesse and me and a number of other people at Gamification Summit live in April. There's a discount code down below if you want to attend. It's a lot of fun. So let's talk about transformational games for a second. We've got some questions backing up already. Why not use the term serious game? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think serious games is it has some problems. First of all, it makes it sound like, oh, this can't, if it's a serious game, it can't be any fun. This was sort of what it sounds like. I actually had someone approach me about wanting to make a game about teaching principles of good comedy. And really, is that going to be a serious game? That doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Um,
Right.
whereas I found that the thing that people have in common when they say serious games is they mean, well, we mean games for purposes that are going to change something, and it's usually change the player through education or changing the player's habits, but sometimes changing the world or changing something. I thought it was more positive and more accurate.
What do you think is hard and easy to change about a player through the process of games? Are there any particular things that are more or less challenging to actually transform?
Oh, I think everything is sort of challenging in its own way. There's a lot of different opportunities. I mean, certainly simple things like imparting a simple piece of knowledge is can be fairly easy, but getting people to remember things is the harder part of it. Um, uh, One thing that a lot of the
When you
games
talk,
we've yeah.
yeah, no, no. I mean, one of the questions that I have, I mean, more specifically, I guess, on that, and then we'll take this question from Michael, is, if you think about, like general game behaviors, like getting people to grind, for example, or do these little behaviors that are maybe not that interesting or a little bit banal, it seems like games have a great deal of ability to accomplish that, to get millions of people to do things like harvest gold, or check on their crops, or, show up every day at 12 o'clock. But what about more complicated behaviors? What about helping people do things like empathy, or feel love, or
Yeah.
be altruistic? What about those things?
Yeah, no, it's you, uh, obviously changing human nature is a thing that probably isn't going to work, but there are a lot of the place where you have the most chance to change somebody is when they're kind of on the tipping point about something. We recently did a game with Yale University called Play Forward, and it's all about trying to get young teenagers to behave more responsibly so that they might not get the HIV virus there. And it implies that it employs a number of different techniques to do this, because part of the notion is that the reason young inner city teenagers are so important when it comes to HIV is they spread a lot of it because partly they're ignorant of safe practice, and then secondly they're easily taken advantage of by people older than themselves. So the game does a number of things where it tries to impart what is safe practice and using techniques that are going to be interesting and engaging and memorable. But then also it tries to get the kids to practice situations that are the sort of situations where you're going to run into danger. So we've got whole scenes where you're at a party and you're looking for, like, all right, what could be dangerous at this party? And we let the whole thing unfold so that you really see all the bad stuff go down. The kids go in the basement and they huff some aerosol cans and one of them dies, and then you get to rewind time and look at, well, what could we have done here? When would have been the right time, and what's the right way in order to say no to something like that? But it's very, like, the whole thing is very subtle and involves layers and layers of psychology, and that's the key with all these things, is to understand the real psychology of it, and then to figure out how you can kind of put the key in the lock in order to change it.
So here's a question that I asked Asi Barak from Games for Change, where of course you've also noted before, last week when he was on the show. Was it hard for you to convince the funders of that game to let the kids die from huffing aerosol cans? And is there a mode where you allow, in that example, the Yale game, which Ivan's put the link up here in the chat window for anyone who wants to check out that cool work, is there a scenario under which you might want to let the kids play out the negative fantasy in some way without this kind of like judgment, or not?
The way the game works is fascinating. First of all, what worked so well was that Yale Medical were incredible partners on the project, and they really understood the psychology of what is going to make a difference with kids and what is it that the kids need to know about, and they were not afraid to pull any punches. So the stuff that happens in there is very real. And then in terms of the negative consequences, we don't just want them we don't just allow them to check out the negative consequences. We actually force them to go down the negative roads. The way the game is set up, you can't unlock the positive paths until you've experienced the negative paths and examine them fully and learn lessons from them. And then you can rewind time and then figure out, well, how can I make it to a more positive path? What is it going to take in order to get there?
So I think this dovetails nicely to this question that we have from Michael Witham, um, which is, I think, a great question. And he asks, how much does context affect game elements and their application? And I want to kind of put this into context for the example that you just gave for
Mhm.
The Yale example, which is, no matter how good this game is that we make, Jesse, or this transformational game or gamified experience that you might be working on, if that comes down from some of these parents, or it comes from their teachers or from a doctor or something like that.
Yeah.
Doesn't that, how does that affect the success or failure of a transformational project like this? And
Oh
what would
yeah,
be,
absolutely. Context for everything is incredibly important. Context, in that case, partly it's a credibility context because you assume something coming from a parent or a teacher or a doctor is going to be something that's preachy. We did another game called Tunnel Tale, which is out there, and we haven't talked about it a lot, partly because of this exact context question. This is actually an anti-drug game. We were approached by a foundation that was interested in trying to get kids off of drugs, and their whole vision was they wanted a game out there that was an entertainment game that had themes in it that would help do two things: make kids understand about the nature of addiction, and then secondly, to have them experience the language of seduction and the language of refusal and get practice with those. But they didn't want it, they wanted to be just perceived as an entertainment game, because they knew that if the moment that it kind of felt like, hey, wait a second, someone's trying to just tell me what to do here, that it wasn't going to work. And context is important with everything when we do games. Like one of the great examples of Disney World, you look at the experiences that go on at Disney World. Adults do things there they would never do out of the context of Disney World. You know, wearing like a goofy hat with Mickey ears down the street. Like you wouldn't do that, but you do it there because the context says, "Hey, this is okay. This is an okay thing to do here." Um, getting people to be playful and what games they're going to be interested in, what they value, is very much about controlling context.
it's a great answer. And just to remind everybody, we're here on the Gamification Revolution. I'm Gabe Zickerman. I'm here with my guest today, Jesse Schell. Both of us will be at Gamification Summit in April, and you can check that out at gsummit.com. And we're talking about, we're talking with Jesse about designing transformational experiences and context, and getting people to be playful. And so you open the door, I have to walk through it. So playfulness, different from games, right, Jesse?
Hmm? Sure.
Playing
Yeah.
games are not the same. How do we get people to be more playful?
Well, it's different in different contexts. And of course, in some contexts, you don't care, like, you don't care if they're playful. Um, but in some contexts, you do. So one of the big things, if you want people to kind of act in a playful way and feel like it's okay to be playful, is you need to find ways to remove all the embarrassment that comes from it. Um, I sometimes jokingly call it disembarrassmentation. I mean, because we are so easily embarrassed, and it's and gameplay is something that you can eat. It seems silly. It's something that kids do, and when you're in a serious context, you're not supposed to be playing. So it's very easy for people to get embarrassed. And when you're trying to introduce a game context into something like a shopping experience, a work experience, um, anything like that, you're in danger of people being embarrassed that they're doing it. I mean, even you look at something as simple as Foursquare. It's a very simple activity, but people make fun of other people for doing that. It seems like people it seems sometimes inappropriately playful. So you've got to make it safe. You've got to make it a context where, hey, this is an okay place to play. And I think usually the best way to do it is privacy, so that no one else can, so that you can do it secretly, so that no one knows, so you have no risk of anyone finding out. Is usually the easiest way.
What do you think about also segmentation, like by level of mastery or a type of player, like children from adults, boys from girls, and so on, as a way of creating more, less embarrassment?
Well, I guess that all depends on the context. Sometimes by separating things, it can make it worse because now you feel like, am I in some kind of special little ghetto that's like just for me, and I should be on one that's more adult, more grown up? Because sometimes having everyone have the same thing makes it okay because everybody's doing the same thing. Um, but on the other hand, customization can be a really good thing too. Usually, I don't see a lot of success with multiple different interfaces into the same experience. More and more people are finding, the interface kind of is the experience, and I haven't seen a lot of success of like multiple interfaces that way. better to make multiple experiences, I think.
Do you think a group, are there groups that are more predisposed to wanting to play versus groups that aren't? Like classically, we think of kids as being very amenable and open to the idea of play and I guess by extension games. Does that get harder as you get older? Is that what it's about? Or is there other, um, are there other restrictions other than embarrassment?
Well, age is definitely a big part of it, right? Because, you get to that age and it's time to put away childish things, as they say. And um, so I think age is a big part of it, but I think a lot of it is context because people play games their whole lives. You look at people playing poker, people playing golf. Games are part of life, like all the way through. It's just a question of um, a time and a place. Is this kind of part of what I want to do or not? I mean, you look at something like frequent flyer miles, and on one level you can really consider that a game, but it sure doesn't feel like a game. Some people make it feel like a game, but mostly
Right.
it feels like a serious thing that's just woven in with the experience, and it doesn't necessarily. I guess all I'm saying is not all games need to have a playful feel.
Which I think is interesting because many people conflate those two things, right? And there's a number of folks who are, their banner, their kind of almost religious view is that everybody should play all the time about everything. And that creates a certain amount of tension, especially when we're talking about gamification in the work context. Many of your examples often touch on that. You talk about it. Do you have any particular kind of thoughts about how gamification finds its way into work and what some of the gotchas might be there?
Yeah, I mean, gamification in the workspace, I think, is incredibly challenging and incredibly dangerous, really, because anytime you're talking about trying to introduce game elements into the workplace, it involves some certain assumptions. First, it assumes that you can quantify good work, which isn't really always the case. So I just had an example. I was at Sears this weekend. I was
Mhm.
buying an exercise bike at Sears, and Sears still, when you buy something, you pay for it with a credit card, and they make you go around to the back, and they got the pickup area. Well, when you go there, you have to, you swipe your barcode at the machine, and a countdown starts. There's a big TV with a countdown going up, and it tells you how long you've been there. Well, corporate has set up this big gamification thing about how quickly can we serve the customers. And they have a big charts up about yesterday, 99% of customers were served in under a minute. And wouldn't you know, I swiped my thing. Within 18 seconds, a guy came out and hit a button saying that I was served, and then he went back in the back and disappeared for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then he came out kind of confused about where my order was, and then it was another 10 minutes, and then finally I got it. But like so here, like the thing fell apart because it was cheatable, right? So cheatability is one way these things fall apart. There are a lot of weaknesses because the realities of work are often too complex to capture properly in simple systems. There are places where it works. I've seen some groups doing uh, you know telephone marketing, that sort of thing, where the work is very quantifiable, very measurable, but they're very much the exception and not the rule.
Let's go back to cheating for a second. So, in many cases, when you talk about transformational games, how concerned are you with anti-cheating measures in the kinds of things that you build at Shell Games? Does it matter when you're working on stuff like that?
Yeah, cheating is really important for a number of reasons. Cheating is something you really have to worry about because two things happen when there's cheating going on. First of all, it means certain players can cheat and they're getting around the system and they're not experiencing it the way you'd want them to. And sometimes people argue, well, that's only going to be about 1% are going to cheat. The other 99% will be fine. But it's not true because if the other 99% are aware that cheating is possible, the experience then becomes incredibly degraded for them because they know that it makes you feel like a chump. I could be doing it that other way. All right, I'll be the good guy. I'll stay here. The whole thing just falls apart and is degraded. And I think it is one of the big problems with so many attempts to kind of introduce game mechanics into other places. Is you really uh, stopping the cheating can be tough in a lot of contexts.
So, but what about, let's talk about an even harder scenario. So, a game that's meant for self-improvement or self-transformation, where there's not really an easy way, let's say, to validate whether or not somebody's following the rules, like, like brushing your teeth or losing weight or exercising or something like that. Can't you also make the argument that if the person is going to cheat themselves, then who cares?
Well, you could, but the thing is, again, um, if the person could do this on their own, they wouldn't need the game mechanic, right? The game mechanic is
Right.
saying, look, no, I'm going to have special persuasive ability to make you care about this and to make you want to do it. And uh, and I really do think in most cases it's the feeling that I could cheat this is what degrades it more than anything else. You look at games that involve the step counting. You know, everyone knows you can kind of just shake the step counter and get a bunch of steps. And that, that, I think more than anything else makes people take step counting games a little less seriously than they would.
Interesting. So we have a question from Jonathan Posner, and I just want to remind everyone we're here on the Gamification Revolution with Jesse Schell. I'm Gabe Zickerman, and if you have questions for Jesse or me, feel free to ask them by clicking on Submit a Question or a camera, and you can come see us soon live. And so Jonathan's question is kind of business oriented, but I want to kind of reshape this a little bit. He's asking about how to make gamification relevant in for service providers in an app context, and I actually want to turn this around for you a little bit. So what are the challenges with making anything, doesn't matter what platform you're on, whether it's the iPhone or the web or whatever, is getting people engaged to come back and keep experiencing the experience, the game or gamified system, transformational game over and over and over again, right? You might be able to get 30 seconds out of somebody, but then there's demands, there's kids, there's parents, got to run around and do different things. Um, so what do you think, especially when it's something harder, when we're trying to get somebody to change their behavior? How do we engineer that so that they keep coming back to do the thing we need them to do over and over again? So
Well, I
it's
mean,
easy to avoid even.
you could ask the same thing with any kind of game design, right? I mean, that's what we want when we design games. We want people to keep playing your game, coming back over and over again. And the answer to the question outside of games is the same for the question is the same answer inside games. You First of all, you've got to find something that is going to be an interesting long-term challenge that resonates with somebody's life. And then there's all these things, of course, you have to do, right? You've got to have it be at the right challenge level and the right increase of a challenge level, and you want to include the right social factors so that I care about that. You might want to have some hidden surprises that are going to come along the way as you go through it, so that I'm curious about how's this going to go down, because the reasons people stop playing a game are so many, right? That that it got boring. I knew what was going to happen next. It got too hard. You need to just get all those things out of the way. And even then, think of the greatest game you ever played. Are you still playing it now? You're probably not. And I think one of the things that goes wrong, people have these unrealistic expectations about what might be possible with game structures. Because most people, when they get engaged with a game, maybe they'll stay engaged with it for, if it's really great, 3 months or 6 months, and they're on to something else. I mean, that's best case scenario in most cases.
So do you feel like, so you talked about these limitations, of what it is that people can or can't do. What do you think, like in your practice? I know lots of people come to you to design these transformational games, and thanks for that question, Jonathan, by the way. So in your practice, what do you feel like some of the things that you have to kind of turn people down for, or disabuse them of before you're able to kind of do projects with them? I imagine there's a lot of people coming to you going, we're just gonna fix the whole world with this one game.
Oh yeah, sure. So a lot of people have unrealistic expectations about what game mechanics can achieve. I remember I had some people from a vitamin company come to me and say, "Yeah, we want to get a gamification system going to get people taking vitamins every day." And I said, I don't, I'm skeptical that's going to work, because let me tell you what taking vitamins every day looks like when you do it perfectly. Monotony forever. There's no rise in challenge. There's no increase in difficulty. And then I asked them, are you planning to make some new product? Perhaps vitamins that get gradually more difficult to swallow, like each day? And they said, no, we're not going to do that. Although I love the idea of vitamins just getting bigger and bigger. And anyway, um, but they know they don't want to do that. What you have to do in every case when you look at these things is you have to look at the situation and you have to ask yourself, what is it about this that is going to make it a better experience for people? And what structure can I put in here that's going to grab people and get people interested? And a lot of times that means you may have to radically transform what you're doing. But if you get back to first principles, what is it that people like about this, and how can I make them like it more? That's what you need to focus on in every case.
So you wrote this book a while ago, which of course I have handily on my shelf all the time. The Art of Game Design, a book of lenses by Jesse Schell, which has become kind of, and I don't want to overstate this, but certainly for me and many of the people that I know, it is like the de facto kind of the Bible of game design. And when you
Wow.
were setting out to, yeah, I mean, it feels like there are a number of definitive books, but it's the one that most frequently kind of comes up and continues to be a kind of bestseller in the category in Amazon. When you were setting out to do this and put your arms around all of this research about games and all the different ideas that people had to come up with kind of a comprehensive system about how game mechanics work and the different concepts behind game design into a single view, did you imagine and how do you feel like that tension resolves between when we're designing experiences just all about games and entertainment and when we're designing an experience where these ideas are ported to another place. Because in the description that you just gave, for example, with the vitamins, you went back and said, okay, well, let's change the core product to be more challenging over time. Like we might design a game from scratch. But sometimes we have this product that we can't actually change or we can't affect as easily. So how do we bridge the gap between those two things where the game elements are maybe outside of the core product?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got to look at and you've got to figure out what can you do that's going to be meaningful, that's going to be rewarding, and that's going to sort of stick with people. Part of the secret of that book was it was not, even though it is ostensibly about game design, it's not really about game design. It's really just about designing anything. But I knew that if I made a book about designing anything, no one would be interested in that. But they'd be a lot more interested in a book about um, designing games because games ultimately encompass all other media. I mean, anything that involves being interactive, um, can easily become a game, and then games can contain every other medium in them. Um, so
So it's kind of meta.
yeah, I
The
mean, I guess
interaction.
for me, there's not like really design is design. It's really it's all design is pretty much the same, and it's all about how do I get people, how do I get people to be interested in it, and that's appeal, and then how do I get people to stick with it, and that's engagement. And it's really just about how do I get people to like things, and which means you have to understand what is it that people like, what is it people want, what is it that people are going to find rewarding, and what is it that people are going to stay with. Because there's so many secret psychological traps. That's really the key. I'm fooling around with another book that's really all about that notion, all about understanding all the hidden mechanics of psychology that nobody talks about.
Well, doesn't it seem some days like it's kind of a we really are bridging this gap between design and psychology, and that's really at the core kind of what the discipline is here.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely. I mean, all design is just applied psychology. That's really all that design is. And it's hard because human beings are just incredibly richly complicated.
Yes, they are. And one kind of last question for you, Jesse, and you've been getting everyone's excited to see your new book, by the way, already here in the chat. One, so hopefully it'll be ready soon.
Oh yeah,
One last
right.
question that I have for you, which is any kind of cool projects that you want to talk about that you guys have worked on at Shell Games recently, or any that are upcoming that we should be paying attention to in the run up to Gamification Summit?
Yeah, one that I'm really excited about is something new we're doing. Right, it started out as a thing called Puzzle Clubhouse,
Yep.
which and it's evolved into something new, which is currently codenamed Game Factory, but it's going to have a real name probably by the end of the week. We're planning to launch it for real in April, and the whole idea of it is we found there are so many people out in the world who want to create games and don't really have any sense about how to get in. They've got an idea for a game, but they don't know what to do with it. And we want to make a place where those people can go and we can help them out. So the whole idea of this website is bring your idea. Everyone's going to give you advice about how to make it better. We'll give you advice. The community will give you advice. You can kind of make it a little better. Everybody votes on which ideas are best. We take the best ones and we build prototypes. We'll get professional developers doing concept art and doing little game prototypes that everybody can play test. There'll be more voting that goes on and more improvements that you'll need to make to your game. And then the top ones that get the most votes, we're going to do a Kickstarter to raise money for them, and we're going to make them, we're going to sell them, and we're going to split the money with you. And we're
Awesome.
excited about this because I think I think people are going to be excited about having an outlet for kind of taking their game ideas to, and it's a great way. I'm always excited about new ways to teach game design, and here we'll be kind of working on these ideas in a very public forum, so you can kind of see them evolving live.
Well, I think it's very exciting, and I've been very excited about that project since you first announced it. I think it's going to be absolutely positively amazing for all of us, and it's going to be transformational for the whole industry. I'm sure as we get more indie games and more interesting ideas surfaced in the world using the crowd and using sort of expertise. Um, and I want to thank you, Jesse, so very much for coming on and being with us here on the Gamification Revolution today. It's been fascinating, of course, as we knew it would be. Jesse Schell, professor at Carnegie Mellon and head of Shell Games, and now this new project, which was Puzzle Clubhouse, but we'll find out by the end of the week. And you can come see Jesse and me, about 50 other folks, speak at Gamification Summit in April, talking about how to make design engaging. Thanks to all the folks who asked questions. Thanks to you, Jesse, and we'll see you all next week. Keep having fun.
All right.